Welcome to the Scale the Chaos podcast, where we talk all things contributing to your organization's chaos and dysfunction. I'm Rhonda Lea, founder and owner of Scale the Chaos, where we transform operational chaos and dysfunction into scalable systems. Today's guest is Lana Kinberg, a seasoned confidence coach and speaker who is dedicated to helping individuals and teams elevate their confidence, communication, and problem-solving skills to become more resourceful and effective. Welcome, my friend Lana.
Hi, Rhonda. Thank you. I'm very excited for our conversation.
I'm excited to have you here. We've talked a lot about the chaos that these various different cycles of lack of confidence, lack of mental fitness brings to us, and how quickly they can get out of hand and become chaotic. So let's talk about what is it we can do to break those cycles.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's understanding where it comes from, right? We could beat that horse, but it's actually a lot more simple, I think, than people
Okay.
realize. And what's always frightening to me is to see the people who get stuck in those micromanaging, stressed out, dysfunctional, chaotic, vicious cycles because they have an opportunity in there with their own life experience, but it starts with building confidence, right? So where does confidence come from? And everybody has a different definition for confidence, but at the end of the day, it's really what you believe your confidence is. And we touched on earlier the three different types of confidence being very specific, task oriented, or task specific, more general, which is just how you feel, how you show up. And then there's situational. Situational confidence is also pretty key. When you think about all the different types of confidence, and I know at NSA, we talk a lot about mining your stories. And I love that expression, especially when it comes to confidence building, because we all have had experiences in our lives where we have failed and we have succeeded, or we have tried and we have succeeded, or whatever the case is, but we've had an opportunity to learn something.
Yes,
Hopefully you have the
that's the
mental
whole point.
stamina to learn something. Exactly. If you teach employees and leaders to develop inner confidence through different tools, self-awareness, mindfulness, mindset shifts, understanding how we all do lean into negative bias and how to break that cycle and reframe different things, like having challenges and reframing those challenges, you can become more capable of addressing whatever challenges come your way. And you can manage the dysfunction a little bit more appropriately.
Right.
So I think that's probably the biggest thing. And I think a lot of companies spend a lot of money on skill development and they don't spend enough money on will development. And
Okay.
what I mean by that is if you have a CRM system and you spend a lot of time getting people up to speed on the CRM system, right? That's great. Now they know CRM, but it's garbage in, garbage out. If you're
Yep.
not putting in valued content, it doesn't matter. I can make stuff up all day long, right? But the reality is, if you have somebody with the certain level of confidence and they want to put their best foot forward and you have behaviors that are indicative of that performance, you think about KPIs. Organizations always institute KPIs.
Yep.
What's the behavior that shows that they're actually doing that KPI? Instead of a check in the box, why don't you start working with your employees to make the cultural differences, to get them to understand why they're showing up the way they are? What are the influencers that are causing this? Is it social? Is it environmental? Is their office too cold? Is it too warm? Are they having to deal with difficult customers more often than not? What are the things that are really hindering their performance? And I don't
Yep.
think companies do enough understanding that will set that's needed. So I think that's the first thing to break the cycle.
Okay.
The second is mental fitness development. So practices like mindfulness, energy management. So knowing again, what are the things that are influencing your energy when you show up to a situation? Are you feeling negative when you show up? Is there somebody in the room that frankly you don't get along with them? But instead of pointing out the differences, embrace the differences and learn something. You don't need to love everybody. You don't need to
Yeah.
get along with everybody. But you do have to realize that when you're in a crucial conversation or you're innovating or whatever you call your sort of boardroom time, understand that the other person is always 10%. Another thing is talking about what I've done with clients who are upper management as well as C-suite is there's two different games, and we've all heard about this through improv, right? The yes and game. Like
Yes.
when you're in a room and you're innovating, instead of coming up with what isn't going to work about a suggestion or when you're problem solving, think about yes and. What I like about the idea is this, and then build on it from there. And don't make judgments in that moment. Just take a spreadsheet or whatever and just write down all of the ideas and then go back and understand and filter what will and will not work. But
Yes.
if you cut somebody off during a planning session or something, you're undermining their confidence, you're undermining their ability to show up with mental fitness, and you're creating an energy influence that's going to be negative. So there's a lot of things that organizations can do. Just simple, really simple.
I like the energy. I've heard a lot about the energy zappers, right? Or I think somebody else calls them zombies. Anyways, there's a lot of different terms that people have for them, but I like that the energy that shows up kind of because we talked about it a second ago about how when people show up with the negative, that really it everybody feeds off of that, and the same with positive. So I
Right.
really like the whole idea of, and then the other thing that you mentioned was what is it that's helping them show up the way that they do? Because it made me remember a time where I worked for an organization and it was mostly men, and that's fine. It wasn't just that they were men, but they tend to run temperature hot. And so I was constantly for my to the point to where my fingers would go numb. And I finally broke down and bought myself a space heater for my office because I came in one day and I was like, I cannot be cold. Like it was taking a mental toll on me,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
And
absolutely.
and yeah, I just remember I thinking how simple it was to just get a space heater for my office and what a huge difference it made on my mental health and productivity.
Yeah,
just
yeah.
just getting warm. Anyways, it really can be some of the more simple things, but nobody would have ever checked in on me and said, "Hey, Rhonda, how's the temperature in your office?" Because to a certain extent, it's my responsibility, right? to make sure that my office is warm or
Well,
cold or
because you have the opportunity, right? But I'll tell you, so the influencers, so there's six key influencers of energy. This is more like in my coaching practice and study and understanding. This is more core dynamics, which I love core dynamics. It's really just understanding the dynamics of groups and teams,
yeah,
simply put. But you have environmental. So that's again, how is the room too dark? Is it too light? Is it too cold? Is
yeah,
it too warm? You have spiritual, which isn't always like God related. It's also
yeah,
what your values are, what your
yeah,
beliefs are. Mental, which is just your ability to understand what makes you feel out of control, what makes you feel like you feel a need to control something. There's emotional, there's social, just showing up to an area where you don't know anybody, right? There's that. Maybe you just don't like the way one person shows up, or maybe you don't like their energy, like you pick up on that. And then there's physical. So if something's hurting you, like you had said earlier, you have a little bit of a scratchy throat and you had a sneezing attack and stuff, that can be physical. All of those things can influence how
yeah,
you show up in any given situation. So understanding kind of the difference between the internal and the external.
yeah,
Internal is really more environmental and social. And
yeah,
then your external is your physical, your mental, emotional, and spiritual. So understanding those differences can really be the determining factor for whether or not you show up in a really catabolic state, which is you're a victim, you
yeah,
feel you've got apathy, or the anabolic state, which is you have an opportunity to accept something and make peace with it, convert
yes,
it to something else, reframe, find the opportunity, find the gift, right? It becomes a whole thing unto itself. So energy is a big component
yes.
of, I think, and what companies don't realize, because you hear energy and it sounds too woo, so everybody wants to stay away from it, but
Yeah.
it
Well, and I
matters.
even yeah, even the organization of your own office or your desk, your workspace, whatever that looks like. I've worked with a couple of organizations where once a year we would have a whole it would be around Cinco de Mayo, we would call it Clino de Mayo, and the entire week we focused on people getting their offices organized.
That's
And
great. I love
it
it.
increased productivity. We did like fun. We did like door prizes and we had a wheel and we made it this whole fun thing and people looked forward to it and everybody participated and we even had a competition to see who could have the cleanest, most organized office, like right. So it broke that mundane. Everybody, you really need to keep your office clean and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And it also promoted because once everybody did that deep clean, it was a lot easier to maintain.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's, I love
they
that.
kept
I
it.
think it sounds like that sounds so fun. That sounds so, it does. It's such a great idea.
It was fun. It was pretty successful, and people looked forward to it. I don't know if they still do it now that I'm not with the organization, but yeah. Anyways, mostly because I love a clean office. I wanted an excuse to spend a week cleaning my office.
If you've ever walked into, if you've ever had to have a meeting in somebody's office that was completely, there's just, it was that in of itself was chaos. That also is a reflection of sort of the person. The old, how you do one thing is how you do everything, right?
Yep.
If your office is slovenly, you're going to show up slovenly. Your attitude is going to be slovenly. You're
Yep.
probably going to be somewhat complacent. You're
Yeah.
probably going to feel a little bit of that apathy.
Yeah.
You're going to be more in a low energy or more of a catabolic state. And that's just the nature of human beings. And again, back to neuroscience, right?
Yeah. And we even took that as an opportunity to organize common spaces, including the break room, the conference room, the supply and copy room. Everybody would sign up to help organize a specific common space. We decluttered out. The first time we did it, I can't tell you how many binders we got rid of. And accounting, no, don't get rid of our binders. And I'm like, no, we are going paperless in this office. So we don't need any more binders. But anyways, it's just that kind of thing, because who knows if we hadn't done that, who knows how long those cabinets would have sat full of unused binders. But
yeah. Yep.
so.
So true. So true.
These days, remote work has definitely become more commonplace, right? And so let's touch really quickly, at least, on what are some of the confidence related issues that are amplified by remote work?
So I think this goes back to us having the skill set versus the will set. And what I mean by that in this context is when you have somebody who is used to going into an office and used to being held accountable because people can see them, right? If they don't have the will to do the job and to do what's expected of them, and most importantly, above all else, do what they say they're going to do,
Yes.
that person can slowly start to lose credibility. When they lose credibility, they lose their trustworthiness. When they lose their trustworthiness, people no longer reach out to them for things.
Yes.
People don't want to talk to them. They become very siloed. And then, and again, the cycle begins, right? It's understanding again what motivates people. Some people are great working in environments where they're by themselves and they don't have to worry about other people walking by their office or whatever, right? There are some people, though, who are terrified. They feel like they're never going to be held accountable. So if you're a manager and you have somebody who is very introverted and likes to be alone and thrives in that environment, great. Check-ins are important, right? Making sure that you're
regular, consistent check-ins. Yeah.
But if you have that person who hates being alone and who has to go to Starbucks every day to work, right? Because they have to be around people.
Yeah.
That's a different type of approach to them, right? Their will set is going to be much different than the person who prefers to be alone. So what's going to influence them? Their energy is going to be lower if they're around people. Somebody else's energy might be higher when they're around people. So they will have to go to a new environment, right? But it's how you understand the differences and embrace those differences. So one is not right, one is not wrong, right?
They're just different. Yep.
They're just different. But if you have not instilled sort of the behaviors that align to those will sets, as a manager, you're never going to be able to understand what that employee is going through. I remember a situation where I have this person who worked for me and his customers loved him. He could do no wrong. He was one of the most genuine, authentic. He was a salesperson, but he was very much, he would be the guy who would be like, you know what? Don't buy this from me because you don't really have the money and it's okay. I'll take you to lunch anyway. Like he was just that person, but people trusted him.
Yeah.
His performance started to struggle and suffer, and I didn't really know what was going on. So we had one of those heart-to-hearts, and I would do check-ins regularly, especially because my whole team was remote long before COVID. They're just remote salespeople.
Yeah.
And what I started to realize, what he shared with me was he was living in a very tenuous roommate situation. One of his roommates had taken in a girlfriend who was very apathetic. She slept all day. When she did wake up, she was always in a bad mood. She would eat all of his food, things like that, right? So you're in
Yeah.
this roommate situation. And if we hadn't had that conversation, I would never have known what was going on with
Yeah.
him. Now, ultimately, he ended up moving out. We put a plan together. But if you don't have those conversations and ask what's at the heart of what's going on, it wouldn't have surprised me if his performance had continued to, he started to have poor performance,
Yeah.
ultimately maybe put on a PIP or performance
Yep.
improvement plan, and then ultimately he leaves. So we lose a valued employee who
Mhm.
loved by every customer he ever encountered
Yes.
because he had a bad roommate situation. If you don't know what's going on and what's corroding that will set, you really need to get to the heart of it. So, yeah, remote work it can be challenging, but it can also be very rewarding if you know how to manage it.
Yeah. And I've had similar situations, even as a manager, I've had some similar situations, even for people who were working in the office. I think you can see it a little bit quicker when they're working in the office and they come in and they're sad or just their mood is different. And it's, hey, are you okay? What's going on? And often it is the roommate or some sort of relationship issue. And I know people want to say that's personal life and keep it personal, but it carries over.
Oh,
And
100%.
to lack empathy for people who are experiencing that, number one, it's not like the managers themselves are immune to that type of thing, right? Like
Yeah.
they're going to have similar situations at some point. Maybe they're not experiencing it then, but they're going to have their own issues at some point, personal issues that they will need to address, and having a lack of empathy. But there's also something else that I find that's really interesting because it's like a running theme through all of my podcasts to the point to where I think I'm going to do a podcast specifically on this topic, but it's about being intentional, right?
Yeah.
Like we have to be intentional. And I think there are a lot of people in life in general, in business, outside business, who are not intentional about what they do, whether it's building confidence, leading teams with confidence, showing empathy, holding boundaries, being civil. Now I'm talking about topics of my past podcasts, infusing humor, whatever it is that we're doing, we have to be intentional. We have to choose to do it. And then we have
Mhm.
to do it, right?
Right.
And then we have to be consistent. And really at the core of that, the intention is, what is it that we want? What do we want to accomplish? And
Mhm.
how do we get that, right?
Yep. Yep.
So, if there's one thing you wish every organization understood about how confidence affects business chaos, what's the one thing that you hope our listeners take from our conversation today?
Ugh. So if I had to make it be one thing,
Okay. It can be maybe two.
I think that they go hand in hand, and we haven't really touched on either one of these very much, but
Okay.
I think
Okay. Let-
there's a little bit of it in everything. Like we touched on it very briefly,
Okay.
but it's a check-in and a reframe.
Okay.
So I think a check-in is really important because understanding where somebody's coming from or what's going on, and you mentioned, like you said, what's personal, and people say don't talk about the personal. Our work and our life has become very intertwined, right?
Yes.
And it is very important to understand what people are going through. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying you get into the
Their
deluge,
personal
the
lives.
trench
Yeah.
with them, right?
Yeah.
But you can help support somebody if you know what they're going through. Otherwise, you're
Yes.
just guessing. So
Yeah.
checking in and seeing how people are not just feeling about something. How are you feeling today? What's going
Yeah.
on today?
Yeah.
Especially if you're in a meeting, because if we walk into a meeting and there's 10 people and one person speaks up and says, I'm feeling blue today.
Uh-huh.
Okay,
Yeah.
what's going on? Is there something that you want to share? I'm not saying you turn it into a therapy session, but
Yeah.
if they're blue about something that's happening at work or at home, give them the opportunity to share
Yeah.
that with the group. What that does is really fosters an emotional awareness.
Mhm.
It fosters, again, that CQ. It helps people see
Mhm.
that you are trustworthy, you're
Yep.
showing empathy, you're showing a vulnerability, which is incredibly important. And that kind of helps with our connection, right? So that would be the first thing. The second thing is the reframe. So take what you've heard
Uh-huh.
and take whatever it is that's going on with the group, and you can reframe. If it's a negative experience, you can reframe it. If it's something where somebody brings up something that's just they're feeling a certain way about a situation or a decision that's been made, maybe that they feel like they haven't had input, most likely everybody in the room is going to be connected with the same, but it helps people realize that they're not alone. And I think that it helps boost confidence just because when you reframe a negative experience, it helps people shift their mindset and recognize, instead of saying, this is always going wrong and I'm feeling so blue about it and there's nothing I can do. Instead, what if we reframed it, or you did a visualization exercise and you understood, if we did that, how would that look, right? But those are two things that I think companies don't do enough. I think people check in, how's it going?
Yeah.
Okay, how's it going? It's good. It's good.
Yeah, exactly.
It's good. What does good mean?
And I love that because generally speaking, when you have a manager employee relationship, regardless of what level that's at, it automatically defaults to somewhat of an us versus them mentality, right? But as soon as that boss becomes relatable, a lot of defenses, a lot of walls go down. The trust increases, the loyalty increases. What
Yep.
they're willing to do for that manager increases their productivity, all those types of things. And I feel like a lot of the difficult, possibly even traumatic experience that I've had in my life, part of the reason for that is so that when I come across others who are experiencing similar things, I can relate to them. I can show them that there's hope. I can show them that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And I can show them that there's life on the other side, if you will, right? From whatever this experience is that they are going through. Lana, thank you so much for being here. What are your closing thoughts that you want to leave with our listeners about confidence?
So it's a great question. Rhonda, I've spent a lot of time just in the subject of confidence and understanding how mental fitness and confidence are interplaying with each other. We all love an acronym, and I've created this acronym, which is really just understanding your self-confidence. And self really comes from your security, your empathy, your luminosity, and your fortitude. So security is really about being secure in yourself, having the ability to be vulnerable, having people accept you for who you are, having your CQ level be very high, your values aren't violated. So all of those things that make up your personal security. And then there's empathy. That's not being negative with yourself, with others and circumstances and situations. Looking at yourself as a 5-year-old and recognizing that you deserve empathy. Looking at the person who you're in a conflict with as a 5-year-old and realizing that they too need empathy. And then luminosity, which is really how you show up to others. So again, a little bit more CQ here as well. And it's just the lightness that you bring to situations, your positivity, how you reframe, how you look at the world through your own filter. And then there's fortitude, and that's all resilience. That's our life experience that helps us be resilient. We create fortitude by failing and learning, finding opportunities in the worst situations, finding gifts in the worst situations, and understanding how we are building that resilience over time. And that gives us more confidence. So when you really focus on those elements of self, you have a better opportunity to build your own self-confidence.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate everything that you've shared with us today, Lana. Thanks. Listeners, you can find Lana at www.lanakinberg.com. That Kinberg, KINBERG.com. And there you can find more about her Confidence to Close workshops. And you can also sign up for her newsletter. I'm sure you can also find her on LinkedIn. I'll have links to all of this in the descriptions for the podcast. You can also download her confidence workbook from her website.
Rhonda, this has been fun. I love the topic. Thank you so much for welcoming me to your podcast. I'm super excited for you. I'm grateful to be a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you. It's a super important topic. I'm glad that we were able to have some time to chat about it. And you can find out more about me at www.scalethechaos.com, where you can find more information about how you can scale your chaos. We'll chat more next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Rhonda.